Hey everyone, Bryan the Writer here. This week, instead of doing my normal thing, which is write up something, talk about it for about 45 minutes or so, half an hour, 45 minutes, I decided it'd be more fun to have a couple of friends come join me. So today I'll be joined by Bill Camp and Pam Kinney. They're both members of the Horror Writers Association and both great writers in and of themselves. So sit back and enjoy the show. Talk to you later. Bye.
That's
So
good.
I want to welcome everybody to a virtual horror panel, calling it a horrifying discussion. We gathered a couple of what I term the superintendents of suspense, the denizens of darkness, practitioners of panic to join in the panel today. So we've got the on my, well, I guess on my screen, because we're videotaping it. We say videotape, but we don't videotape anymore. Anyway, to my left, I have Bill Camp. And then down below me, I have Pamela K. Kinney.
You know, that sounds really, won't discuss it. It happened already to me today and the other.
So again, we're taping this for posterity. I'm actually going to take the whatever file falls out of this, I don't know. And I'll run it through the editor and post it. And for some reason, the video on my end is backwards. I have no idea. I don't know if you see the writing, it's backwards. I don't know. Anyway, so I have a couple of questions that I put together beforehand, and I've shared them with the panelists, so they have them already. And so let's get started. Of course, I don't think we can talk about anything these days without COVID-19 being the most predominant thing we're going to talk about. It's certainly the most important thing that's dominating our lives right now. And while we each have our own stories about how we are surviving COVID-19, I was thinking to myself, how is this going to influence our writing in the future? How will this, or how has it impacted what we're working on today? Bill, why do you go first?
Well, so far, I teach at several colleges, so it hasn't really impacted much yet because I don't have much time to write for the next 2 weeks when classes end. But I can definitely see the isolation idea being an impact. Thinking of things like that. I think of some books that have been written about pandemics before, like The Stand. I Am Legend comes to mind, some of the older ones anyway. And it's gotten me thinking, what would I do if I wrote a pandemic story of some kind? There's got to be one brewing in there somewhere.
How about you, Pamela?
Well, number one, RavenCon has a thing going on next month, so I promise to submit a story and see what happens. I've got one I chose. They're using something called corvid, something like that. It's birds, a species of bird, crows, ravens, all that stuff that are intermittent. And I'm choosing a crow to do a story, probably dark fantasy horror. We'll see how it comes out, because it's been coming in my head, and I really need to sit down and write that one. But I'm also been researching for this Paracon, and my subject for that on Sunday, that either will be Facebook Live if I can make it, but I'm going to also videotape it, see how it happens if I record it on my camcorder, and then I can always do a watch party on the pandemic and the paranormal. And there's a lot of stuff in the past as it is. Plus, what's happening now, I'm hearing other stories, and I've had experiences ghost-wise, so I can imagine a lot of ideas with this can be done just with this going on. Plus how people are reacting. Let's be honest. We're seeing some of the craziest people doing stupid things. Let's open up early. No, you know what? You're not even wearing masks. What the heck are you doing there protesting unsafely? So there's so many things you can think what people are doing as it is, not even just the supernatural as it is. So,
you know, it's funny, Pamela, you mentioned that specific, you brought in the specific example of the group of people being together during a pandemic when, they really should be home, not out and about goofing around with one another. And
they're not even 6 feet apart. I mean,
well, and I was
6 feet really is.
Well, I was thinking about that as being a really sort of this kernel of an idea of, let's say you have a group of people where they're not supposed to be together. Maybe a few of them are infected. Maybe they're together with their various diseases. And since they're all standing together, that's the catalyst for touching off a much more deadly strain, like, I don't know, the zombie epidemic, or maybe it turns a bunch of them into vampires. I mean, we could go all kinds of directions with that, just that one scenario alone.
Yeah, I was thinking of that too. Like I Am Legend was about the vampires as well, that I brought up earlier.
Which I still have yet to read, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites, actually. It is.
I recommend it. I grew up on Richard Matheson.
Yeah, it's not too long either. You should get through it pretty quickly. But it also makes me think about some of the pandemics that have happened in the past too. And I was reading up on a few of them, like the Black Plague wiped out literally millions of people, wiped away almost all of the Native Americans. Not to mention a third of Europe.
Well, they spread a lot longer than they think the 14th century. It went in a lot of
people. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It was hundreds of years that thing went on. There's a lot of things you could do. And sometimes I do like to write period pieces. So I was wondering, if I could find some new spin on a Black Plague story.
I was kind of thinking that, with COVID-19, is it necessarily that it, again, this is the writer mind at work. Is this really something that is this really truly new, or we just didn't know to look for it before? And what would the implications be for writing that scenario today?
Well, there's a lot of other diseases. There was an article I just posted on my Facebook that there is a lot more if we don't take care of the earth. If you notice, the earth is getting much better, which is telling us that maybe at some point, and I know being Catholic, that might be a thing I'm thinking, but honestly, talk about the end of the world. I mean, maybe it's Earth, maybe it's a supreme being getting back at us for destroying the planet. There's enough of a horror story if you think about what's happening now, for real. But they actually said, a biologist, another article I read, a biologist said there are a lot worse than COVID out there. We just haven't had it yet, and we're lucky so far. So, and there's one actually in Tibet too, I read, that they're having, because of the climate change, a lot of the ice has been melting. And there's some prehistoric ones that haven't been there for eons. Can't one of those come back? How bad are they?
And there's always that scenario that we could write.
I remember reading a few years ago when Ebola was the big thing, that if you combine something with the subtlety of how it spreads of COVID-19 along with the deadliness of Ebola, you really have like a Stan type novel.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Really wipes out a lot of people that way.
The Black Plague is still here. The bubonic plague is still happening. It actually happened, I think, was a year or 2 years ago.
There was a couple cases here in the U.S.
It pops up every now and again.
Yeah. So, but now, of course, we're all at home. Do you think this is causing people to read more at home?
I hope so.
What influence? Yeah, me too.
I'm reading. What's wrong with the rest of the world?
I know that this whole thing is sort of driving me bonkers, and whether it's that we're reading physical books or doing books on tape. I know I'm doing a ton of books on tape, not necessarily horror related. I'm also, like, right now I'm reading, I've got an audiobook of Robert E. Lee. It's very interesting. Those kinds of, I was doing one on George Washington. I'm hoping that more people are turning to audiobooks.
As somebody who will tell you, I don't have audio right now, but the new ghost book that just came out has been selling well. Strangely, the weirdest thing, it was doing well, and I have people tell me they bought it on ebook. Some of them are actually enjoying it. Somebody's going to review it. I asked them to review. I was going to give them what my publisher gave me. He said, "Oh no, I'm already bought it, and I'm enjoying it so far." But I noticed some of the print books are started keeping up and actually surpassing. So, but that's, of course, that's a ghost book, and it may be different than fiction per se. So I know I'm reading on Kindle because I have stuff. It's cheaper to download. Plus, I have a couple of review books I have to review. They're not coming out for a few months. Yeah. So I guess I'm just hoping they're buying our books. I mean, we're writers and want them to do more than just talking about the newest movie they saw on Netflix. I'm watching it too, but I'm also reading. So.
Right. So, I think there probably will be an expansion of pandemic books at some point shortly after this. It helps people connect with what's going on in the real world.
But I mean, realistically, have pandemic, and we mentioned The Stand earlier, but really, pandemic has always sort of been this thing that I think really plays well in the horror realm, because we're always afraid of something that is completely out of our control. And at its base essence, I've always said that that's really what makes great horror.
Well, look at Edgar Allan Poe, Dance of the Red Death. I mean, he literally wrote one right there, and showing how these rich people still had a party. You think, like they tell us not to have more than 10 people or anything else. I'm hearing stories now that their neighbors are having big, noisy parties. And I said, well, if I told that person was actually a horror writer, I said, well, if you can prove they have more than 10 people, call the police, because if they're that bad, I mean, there's probably more than 10 people. Yeah. So look at what happened with the Dance of the Red Death. He had a lot of people dancing, and death still came.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it collects everybody together and gets them all ready. Makes it easier. But I think
go ahead.
I think it definitely lends to horror because we always talk about our invisible killers, right? And this is literally a real life invisible killer that they can come and get you. Even if it doesn't kill you, it makes you very sick.
It's haunting us just like a ghost would, but you're right, it's invisible. It's
it's invisible to us. I mean, unless you have a magnifying,
and that isn't that, and I was in a panel discussion last part of last year, and we were talking about what the difference is between I can murder somebody in a paragraph, or I can make you afraid they were going to be murdered for 4 pages. I would rather have the latter. I would rather have you totally stress out for 4 pages and actually maybe not even kill that person right then and there.
Yeah.
But
you
that's...
can touch them now. You can touch them now. People just tell them you have something. People have been actually pretending that anyway and getting arrested. What if you hated somebody so much, a neighbor, and you went out there and they're walking, you walked up and touched their hand on them?
Yeah,
and say,
absolutely.
Guess what? I've been tested, and it's...
So
you might be lying, but...
So taking the contrarian point of view now away from books, do you think that are somewhat... do you think that something like this drives people to things more like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon movies over books? Or do you think a rising tide raises all boats?
I like to think the rising tide raises all boats, because if there's more time on your hands, I'm sure you're going to watch some movies, but at some point you read a little bit more as well. At least I hope so. I do.
I hope.
Like comfort. Books are comfort. Always are. I go to bed at night, and that's when I read. It helps me sleep to begin with, which is kind of odd, but actually works for me. And I just like a little bit of comfort. And if it's a good book, I want to feel good and comfortable at night. It's not a very comfortable situation in the real world. So,
but okay. Building on what Pamela just said, is it that so we've got a horrible world outside where we can't go outside, we can't be within 6 feet of each other, TP is hard to find. So does that make us more apt to want to go and read a story or be immersed in media where horror is a consistent theme? Because I don't know.
For me, I like horror. and it's a comfort food. So I
Yeah.
can read it and not be, because it's nothing reading right now that I'm reading that's the end of the world, and it's a pandemic anyway. Some people said they can't handle it. I know a horror writer said she couldn't handle it, and she wanted to know about any other books that she could read, believe it or not. So, but I've seen other people agree with me. They're comfort food. They watch horror movies. It's still comfort food. But, you know, for me, all kinds of readings comfort. Something I like, I'll read. But there probably are some trying to find even a romance at this time where there's a happily ever after. So that maybe they can at least say, I'm getting a happily after. I don't know right now if I'm going to live or die, for all I know at this point. I mean, I could walk in a store and someone's walking in there without, and there's people in there, I've seen them coughing in the store without masks. So you wonder, what if it gets to me and that's the one that's going to get me? So to them, you know, romance, it's comfort food, so they're reading it. Horror, for some of us, it's still comfort food too, and fantasy. So it just, I'm thinking that's for me anyway, but I'm different. I can't promise what everybody else. Just
I don't think you're that different.
Actually, the only one horror writer that said that she couldn't suddenly read or watch horror anymore. So maybe because it was so much from being out here that she wants us to name some other books of fantasy and everything else and romance that, you know, she could read. You know, nothing horrible, but something in something anyway. You know, light horror.
I think two things. One thing that you bring up, Bryan, is there is more competition out there certainly today. You know, we're competing with. There's more options than there used to be with books and movies and Netflix and whatever. But I think at some level, horror does resonate. It's visceral. It helps us connect. And some people may turn away from it temporarily, but I think at some point they're going to want to say, you know, it's like when you first run away from the scary thing and then your head turns around to find out what it was. At some point, you know, maybe we'll come to that point where we turn that head around and look at what it was.
It's kind of like why we still all go to haunted houses. Although we know in real life the guy with the axe is not going to come around the corner and chop our heads off. We still want that scare factor where we go in and they come around the corner, rah!
Psychiatrists say it's good for us, so they say absolutely it's good for you.
So I'm currently working on my. I took a brief hiatus from doing horror because I was writing a lot of mystery, and now I'm working on horror again, and I'm doing something that I've never done before. I'm writing a vampire. And I like vampires because we know in our heart of hearts that vampires cannot exist, but they're still fun anyway. There's this whole enduring theme of vampirism that goes way back. And even in our current situation with COVID-19, I still find myself drawn to these themes because it's escapism for me. It's like Pamela says, this is comfort food for the horror community.
Yeah, I agree with her there too. It's definitely a comfort food, something to just escape into for a little while. See somebody else get tortured for a change instead of me.
Absolutely. So I'm actually currently reading a sort of an action assassin series right now, but I have so much other stuff to read because I'm kind of reading agnostic anyway. I'm not focused on any one thing, but. I forgot where I was going with that point. What's everybody reading? That's
Gosh,
where I was
I'm
going.
reading review books back to back so I can do them. One of them, they're both arcs, is more of a urban fantasy with fae and dragons and stuff like that. Okay, alternate universes and all. The other one is American Demon. What's her name? She's a big writer. She's actually was very popular. It's urban fantasy, but her character was the first book was Dead Witch Walking. She's actually a demon, and there's all that stuff. So, and it's pretty good. She's a good writer. So I'm reading those two to review for them. And before that, I was reading Christopher Golden's with all they're kind of werewolves, but they're not. There was a whole novels put together in ebooks. I was reading those for. Yeah, all through the books, 5 books. So.
Well, what when I'm not reading student papers, I still have like hundreds of those, well, 800. When I'm not reading that, when I try to get away, I've been reading Dean Koontz Frankenstein and continue on with the, trying to get through a lot of that series. Still on the first one now, though, but some of that is for my research project on the Frankenstein book that I still work on whenever I can here.
Okay, very cool, very cool. That's kind of exciting. I love the old monsters the best.
Yeah, I always go back to the monsters. I mean, if I see somebody has written something on a werewolf or a mummy or a vampire or something, it usually draws my attention first. Although I like other horror too, of course. But
I write the ghosts. I write the monsters. I prefer that over the serial. If I have serial killers in it, they're the ones that get it from the monsters.
See, I always like the serial killers. I always go back to the serial killers. There's something about a human. So, and by the way, psychology tells us that this just doesn't happen. But I love the idea of a character that goes from being perfectly normal to something happening that flips a switch, and then all of a sudden they're insane. The psychologists will tell you that just doesn't happen. There's always underlying issues as well. But the idea of somebody going from being a normal human being to being a monster, in my opinion, that's, and that's what I was thinking about the whole groups of people together during this time of COVID. If like COVID-19 were to morph into something else mixed with other elements, all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe it makes a group of serial killers that are suddenly unleashed in the United States when there's only 4, generally speaking, operating according to FBI statistics.
It does something to their minds, maybe. Talking about serial killers, I just finished the season ender, but thank God that one did. Prodigal Son.
Ah, yes,
you ever
yes.
seen it? That's a good one. It got me addicted.
I haven't watched much of that. But I know that my wife actually watches that, and it looks really good. I just would need to get caught up on it. Right now, I'm watching What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh,
that's a good one too. I'm sorry. It makes me
that one
laugh.
is pretty
There's
good.
nothing scary about it. I just laughed my head off. I think, golly, I like this past Wednesday. I watched it Thursday. Could I record it? I thought, oh, I'm depressed, but I watched that and I felt good after that because I'm laughing my head off at these.
I finally saw the movie of What We Do in the Shadows. Anyway, I haven't seen the episodes, but it does look pretty good.
Now I know, Bill, you're super busy right now with school and everything else.
Yeah.
But all things being accepted for what they are, like we can't actually change anything, what would you guys think the biggest impact to your writing process has been? I know for me, in addition to writing, I've also done a lot more videos, but I also started podcasting as well because, I don't know, it just seemed like a thing to do. Because now I found myself with tons of extra time on my hands, so why not?
I'm writing. If I'm not reading something or even watching them, I am writing. I'm trying to keep off Facebook. That's where I'm trying. I think that's probably where, if I am depressed deep down inside, is to be connection with the people on there, which shouldn't be because they've got a lot of weirdo people coming out of the woodworks. And so I try to get off of that, but I do write more writing. I have actually a YA apocalyptic urban fantasy I found that I actually finished. I forgotten I had it. It was on my external hard drive. And I was like, oh my gosh, I finished it. It looks like I finished it. So I'm going over to edits. I want to go through. I already have a publisher said they would be interested. The one that did my science fiction. So she already said that to me. So.
Yeah.
Excuse me. One thing that I think it will affect me is that I started having to teach from home, and they want you to be online during the times of classes and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that I can make this translate into when I have my time off, my weeks off, that I can be more disciplined and sit there, roughly 9 to 5, give or take a little bit at least, and write more that way and research.
Well, it's hard for you if as a writer, if you want like these classes. They're talking about. I took this class. You can't, because looking at some of those, I'm not doing it, but I know a lot of people that can't probably even take these classes. They'd be interested in, the other writers talked about, because they're not exactly, they're actually structured at a time. You'd think they would have it where we'll put that on and then we'll just leave for you to watch it anytime, but it isn't. So yeah, people like you that are stuck.
Yeah, one thing that gets to me too is when they do schedule those classes, they seem to schedule it at the same time that colleges are happening.
Right.
It's like right when it's over, I have like 3 weeks of nothing to do, and that's usually when I get a lot of writing done. But it'd be nice if they schedule those kind of classes in between classes.
So it's funny. There was a podcasting advertisement. It's one of those advertisements they do for they basically like insert name of whatever, and then they have like stock writing. So it's the $5,000 course now available for $29.99 or whatever. And a bunch of people jumped on it because it's like, learn podcasting, a $5,000 blah 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 blah. Well, everybody pointed out that if you really want to learn how to podcast, you go to YouTube, or oddly enough, you just pull up a podcast on how to do a podcast and you learn. It's really kind of that easy. So it's kind of funny, but I have done, I've actually watched a couple of different things on different courses to sort of improve my knowledge base at this time we have. But I also found some interesting things about my own reading habit or my own writing habits that I didn't really realize. For example, I'm far better at writing in the mornings than I am in the afternoons. In the afternoons, I lose my creativity and I just can't do it. So that's one of the big takeaways, I think, from all of this. I wonder how much, if we had 30 people here, we could probably make a list of how this current situation has affected writers across the board, and what the impact has been, what it means for the writing world. I don't know. Are we going to see in about 6 months, I don't know, tons and tons of manuscripts coming out? I don't know. We'll see.
Possible.
We'll see
A
what
lot of
happens.
it's published, and some will probably won't be edited as well either, sadly. But there will be a lot of good ones. Yeah, it's a lot of good time. I don't work, so I'm home, and for me that's fine. And my husband's gone. So for me, the best working time is Monday to Friday because he's gone. The cat just sleeps beside me, doesn't bother me during the day. And
I was going to say, no, Pamela, you do work. You work a lot.
Yeah, I work a lot writing, but I've got like having to worry about a job too, which I say yay for the writers that can still do that. I've seen New York published authors that are still working and they have to write these books that I do, and it's like, wow, you really have it doing more than most of us. That's hard work.
We have Bill's dog joining us today.
My wife just came home and the dog's barking for her.
I love it.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
My cat's gone because Daddy Bill's home, so I'm ignored now.
That's my coworker now.
Yeah, no, I've got one of those too, a big Labrador Retriever.
Okay.
So anyway, let's see how much time. We probably don't have a ton of time left because these are only the 40-minute Zoom recordings we can do. But so we talked a little bit about, but I think we hit all the main points. Is there anything else we need to talk about before we go away?
Maybe website if you want to promote that.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to get to that. So I'm just going to say that for my own house right now, I had beta reader input back for my next science fiction novel, and I need to get that stuff updated. Then I have to get that out to the editor. But that one I may actually look for a publisher for, try to shop it around and see, because it's kind of a pretty good little storyline. But you can find all my stuff, of course, on Amazon. You can find my podcasts are out there and the videos as well. How about you, Pamela?
Well, my website helps point people to a lot of things for me, including my books and all. And that's https Pamela K Kinney.com. That's PAMELAKKINNEY, for those who want to know. I'm also on Facebook. I'm also tweeting, and I'm on Instagram, so that helps. So Instagram, I gotten some sales that way, so it works.
Very good, very good. I'll also try and put those links in whenever I put do a video up and get it out there, and we can share that around.
For me, I just heard word a few days ago that I have a short story coming out on Page and Spine.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. They're Out of This World page. It's a fairly new page for them.
Cool.
I got one I'm going to send them that was rejected, but I almost had a sale. They said that they told me it made the first round, but it didn't make the second round. They said they got astronomically a lot of submissions, surprisingly. That's probably another competition. There's a lot of people out there writing.
Yeah.
But they said it did make the first round, so that was pretty good,
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get kicked off here, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of our busy schedules to do this. And thank you guys for coming.
Thank you
for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And everybody out there, write.
Right. And buy books. Buy books.
And read.
All right. Thank you very much. And I will see you guys around.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed that. About as much fun as I did hosting. If you'd like to see more, give me a thumbs up. Again, if you have any ideas for things you want to see on videos, any suggestions, please post them in the comments below. Remember, if you like this video, please hit subscribe so that you can be posted whenever new things come out. As for me, if you want to find out more about Bryan the Writer, you can go to my website, www.bryannoack.com. You can also find me on wherever you get your podcasts from, and videos, of course, on YouTube. Thanks a lot. Have a great week, and we'll see you later. Bye.